Now, next is cloud application threats. Okay. When it comes to app threat detection, we have got a couple of solutions, right? In Sentinel, outside Sentinel. Uh, we understand, I understand we are talking about Sentinel, but I want you to know something, and that is in Azure, or to be very precise, in Entra ID, we have got a type of a policy known as a CAP policy, CAP, which stands for Conditional Access Policy. And the Conditional Access Policy is used to offer zero-day threat protection. Okay, there are two different types of models, security models available. One is defense in depth. The other one is zero trust model. Defense in depth means um, we have got this information or data, which is sort of pearl in the middle. Okay. Around the data lies the computing layer. I mean, we access data through a computing services. Around the computer, we have got this network layer. Outside network, we have got the physical layer. Okay. According to defense in depth, each and every layer must be protected. Information or the data can be protected by offering services like encryption. The computing layer can be protected by installing antivirus, anti-malware. The network layer can be protected by deploying firewall, DDoS protection plan. The physical layer can be protected using surveillance cameras, physical logs, and so on. Okay. So the objective is threat can happen. Nothing is perfect in the security world. Compromise can happen, but at least we have got different layers, and each and every layer will be protected by different security solutions so that the threat can be stopped at a certain layer. If the data gets compromised, at least the computing layer can be protected, isolate the device. Okay, that's different. That's defense in depth. We have got a zero-day attack, a zero-day threat. Zero-day threat means assume breach. Always assume threat can happen, always assume compromise can happen, and you should always verify explicitly, constantly monitor. That means simply we have given you an organizational laptop. That does not mean any traffic originating from your organizational laptop will be a legit uh, attempt. Simply we have given you an employee badge. That does not mean you should be always trusted. Okay. So we have got this conditional access policy in Azure. Conditional access policy will give you access to applications, cloud applications, on the basis of certain conditions. Okay. If you're using, if you're trying to access, let's say, Teams online or SharePoint online, it does not matter which device you're using. Organizational device, non-organizational device, does not matter the location. Are you connecting through a secure VPN services, or you're connecting using a public hotspot? It does not matter how are you consuming. Are you consuming using a browser? Are you consuming using an app? We will monitor explicitly. We will constantly monitor. And if we find that there is some sort of a risky user activities related with your attempt, or a risky sign-in attempts related, which is related to your attempt, we will block you. We will either block you, or we will give you access only if you satisfy certain conditions, like you have your multi-factor authentication configured, your device must be enrolled in Intune, your device must be deemed compliant in Intune, your device must be Entra ID joined, and so on. Okay, so that's conditional access policy. It has got nothing to do with uh, this cloud application threat. It is a tool which comes with Entra ID, with the help of which we can detect threats at an app level. By the way, Sentinel can ingest these kind of threats from conditional access policy and display within the centralized dashboard in Sentinel. Okay. The other solutions is we have got Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, MDCA, and we have also got Microsoft Defender for Office 365. There are differences between these two. Both Microsoft Defender for Cloud App and Microsoft Defender for Office 365 comes bundled with Defender XDR. So Defender XDR comes with MDE, Defender for Endpoint, MDI, Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, and Defender for Office 365. So what's the difference between these two, Defender for Office and Defender for Cloud Apps? Well, Defender for Office will only detect vulnerability at an Office 365 app level. SharePoint Online, Teams Online, Exchange Online, Yammer Online, and so on. Okay. If you're using other applications, like a typical organization will be using so many web applications like Salesforce, Dynamics 365, third-party application, some sort of, finance-related web applications. Microsoft Defender for Office 365 will not detect any threat at those app level. So how do we detect those kind of threats? Well, we have got Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps will detect any kind of risky activities originating from a specific app, suspicious API call. An app is trying to call certain APIs which does not look legit. Then if you have not configured web applications properly in Azure, we have got a concept of an intra ID registration of an application. That means if I can either create an application. I mean, if you have got an in-house development team, they can create in-house developed applications, or maybe you can purchase, or maybe you have purchased a third-party application, completely different application. Well, the concept of intra ID registration means an app purchased by an organization or an app created by an organization cannot be distributed to the users, cannot be distributed to the organizational users, including the guest users in a B2B collaboration, unless and until you have registered those applications in Entra ID. Now, when you will register the application in Entra ID, you will have to not only register, you will have to configure a couple of things like configure SSO, configure things like certificates if it is a web-based application, configure encryptions, and so on. If you have got a bunch of applications registered in Entra ID, but you have not configured as per Microsoft best practices in terms of security, then Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps detects those kind of misconfigurations. Once both Microsoft Defender for Office 365 and Microsoft Defender for Cloud App detects this kind of suspicious activities, what they do is they ship all those activities to Sentinel. And then the SOC team perform investigations on those things, and accordingly they will remediate. So this is how Microsoft handles threat at an app level. Well, the one more thing which I forgot to mention, this Defender for Endpoint, which is a part of Defender XDR, is so cool. One, if you, I'm not sure like whether you have used it, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or you have not used it, but this Defender for Endpoint, which is an endpoint threat detection and remediation tool, I told threat detection and remediation tool. Why did I mention remediation tool? When you will, in Defender for Endpoint, what happens is if I've got a bunch of endpoints, let's say I've got few thousand computers within my organization, or maybe I've got security devices, IDS, IPS devices. Once you onboard, then in Defender for Endpoint, there is a concept of a device group. You need to create a device group. Now you can create device group on the basis of conditions, like put all the devices where the operating system is Windows 11 on such and such device. Put all the devices from a specific manufacturer to a specific device, the group. Put all the computers which has got a role of Active Directory on such and such group. You can create multiple different device groups. Okay? And when you create a device group, you create something known as DPR, which stands for Device Population Rule. And with the help of these kind of rules, the devices gets populated with endpoints. Okay. Why do we create a device group? Well, we create a device group just to set the remediation level on the device. We understand Defender for Endpoint will automatically detect the threats, which is fine. It is supposed to do this. But once the threat gets detected, then what? Okay. Well, Defender for Endpoint is an example of a couple of things. So it's Microsoft is all about terminologies, right? Defender for Endpoint is an example of DVA, Threat and Vulnerability Assessment. It has got the capability of evaluating threats. TVM, Threat and Vulnerability Management. It can not only detect threats, it can manage the threats. And it is also an example of EDR, which stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. So we can, once we have populated the devices within the device group, we can go to the property of a device group and we can set a remediation level, which can be full remediation. It can be no remediation. It can be a semi-remediation. In case of a full remediation, no question asked, Defender for Endpoint will automatically decide what action should be taken in order to eradicate that particular threat. Semi-remediation, no remediation actions will be taken by Defender for Endpoint, but it will tell you that these are the actions you should take. And if you approve, Defender for Endpoint will take these actions. No remediation means no actions will be taken. Defender for Endpoint will only detect the threats and that's it. And it makes sense on a lot of occasions. Like for instance, think about a server which has been compromised. Let's say certain DLL files from the system folder or root directory has been compromised. If you let full remediation, those files might get deleted. Those files might get sent to the quarantine section, and as a result of which the machine might crash. The server will not boot. So sometimes it makes sense just to ignore the remediation, detect the threats, and you perform remediation on your own. So Defender for Endpoint has got that capability. Well, let's always remember that it was always a challenge for a typical organization to get some sort of holistic view, like what's happening in the security framework. These days organizations will have too many applications, right? It is not possible for someone or a dedicated team to look into all the different areas because different applications will have their own security tools, will have their own security dashboard. There is no consolidation. So Sentinel will basically fill up that particular gap. Sentinel will basically ingest the security information from multiple different sources.